Using the Enneagram as a tool in times of stress. Last week, I don't know if you remember how we ended off, but I ended off last week and talked about the different affirmations that each Enneagram type would be good to memorize and to use through the week. I just wonder if anybody thought of that throughout the week, and I wonder if that helped at all, or did it come to mind at all? So, but the affirmations that I talked about were things that really our healing inside has to do with some of these messages that I feel like God wants to speak into our lives, but it's good for us to really, I asked the question, what would it look like if we really started to believe those affirming things about ourselves? So for example, for the 1, it was you are good. For the 2, it is you are wanted. For the 3, it is you are loved for yourself. For the 4, it is you are seen for who you really are. Number 5, the investigator, your needs are not a problem. 6, you are safe. 7, you will be taken care of. 8, you will not be betrayed. And 9, your presence matters. So those things were like affirmations that we did last week, and I hope you don't just take it one time. I think there's sort of things that we can return to, and especially in times of stress or in times of fear or anxiety or even sense of failure, things like that, it's really good to really be aware of what message it is that you really need to move towards to be healthier. So tonight, I want to move on to something else a little bit similar to that, but before I do, I just wanted to do a larger perspective of the Enneagram. So even though I use the Enneagram all the time, and I find it very, very helpful, I just want to reiterate, it is not the only tool there is, and also becoming self-aware isn't just about learning what your personality type is either. I mean, it's helpful, but it's not the only tool, and it's not the only way to really become fully self-aware. The reason for this is we are not our personality. The personality we have is a part of who we are, but I am not my personality. I am more than just a personality or a personality type. So I just want to really encourage you to think about that. And I don't know if any of you remember, quite a while ago, there was a very popular book by Rick Warren called The Purpose-Driven Life. Do you remember that book? Probably many of you have that book on your shelf, or you've read it. I heard of a couple of friends of ours that is a married couple. They're actually going through that book again, The Purpose-Driven Life, I think. And I think there are questions in there and things like that. But during that time, though, Rick Warren wrote the book, The Purpose-Driven Life. There was another book that came out very close after it, and it was by a man by the name of Eric Ries. And Eric's book was entitled Shape, S-H-A-P-E. And I sort of really got a lot out of this book, and I got a lot more out of this book once I did a lot of work with the Enneagram. And I just want to talk about that for a minute. So personality is important, but it's not the only thing about you. So the book Shape introduced the concept that God has made us particular ways, and we're made up of different parts. So the S in the word shape stands for spiritual gifts. And the spiritual gifts that God has given you, regardless of your personality, are very interesting things. So, for example, some people have a spiritual gift of teaching, or a spiritual gift of prophecy, or a spiritual gift of evangelism or serving. And, these are listed in the Bible, these spiritual gifts. And that doesn't necessarily line up with a particular personality. So those of you who are spiritual, you might have done some spiritual gift assessment, a great tool for self-awareness. That's good to become aware of the way that God has gifted you spiritually. And so that's one of the things. So the H in the word shape is heart, and that means passions. And again, that's part of who you are. What are you passionate about? And so we have different things that we're all passionate about. That's a part of who you are. So some people are really passionate, for example, about flowers or gardening or birds or fishing or hunting or whatever. That's a part of who you are. So what are your passions? Where are they there? Passion for the arts or passions for science, different things like that, things that you're passionate about. Maybe it's issues, injustice, particular styles or environmental care or different things. That these are our passions. So the H stands for heart, and that makes you quite unique. The A in the word shape stands for abilities, and these are things that you have actually acquired and skills that you've picked up. You might have natural ability, but you've honed that ability, and so then you did pursue an engineering degree or a teaching degree, or you mastered playing an instrument, or you were immersed and learned a different language. And these sort of abilities are added to in your life, and that's definitely a part of who you are. Some of you might have had theological training or psychological training. Things like these abilities are a part of who you are. And experiences P is personality in the word shape. So personality, so the Enneagram tells us, describes 9 different ways of being in the world. A personality, that is the way you view and interact with the world, and that's part of who you are as well. And then the E stands for experiences, and that also shapes you as an individual, regardless of your personality type. So, for example, I grew up in Australia. That's part of my experience. My heritage is different from probably most of you here. Not everybody. I do have Australians listening. But my experience being Australian is we had a lot of bushfires. We had a lot of floods growing up. When I went walking out in the bush or in the wild, we were always aware of snakes. I mean, my experiences help shape me and make me part of who I am today. Just like you. You might have had experiences maybe when you were a kid that you might have witnessed something that was rather spectacular, and that was an experience that shaped you. I mean, I feel like the kids going through the COVID-19 right now, this is a shaping sort of experience for them. In fact, it is for all of us, right? So we are more than just our personality, but I want to talk to you about the importance of personality, like why would you use the Enneagram? And the way I like to describe it is your personality is like a grid that all these other things fall into. And so it's the way you sort of filter information. Your personality will actually act like a filter, and that will fall into you. The spiritual gifts, your passions, your abilities, and your experiences will fall onto the personality, and you will process those things based on your personality. So this sort of accounts for why 2 siblings can really grow up in the same house with the same sort of parenting, maybe even go to the same school, and there's a lot of similarities, but because it strikes them differently, and the way their filter is and their personality, they can get quite different messages and take different things out of the very same experience. This is the power of understanding your personality and understanding what's healthy about that personality and what's unhealthy about that personality. And so I think the other aspects of who you are very formational. The personality is very important, that you, if you can, get to understand the way that you've been wired. And that's why I really like the Enneagram. It gives you that, doesn't just put you in a box, but it gives you a sense of what does a healthy me, a personality type like I am, what are the benefits of that personality? What are the things that are the pitfalls of that personality? What am I exhibiting? Am I healthy in that regard or not? So the healthier you are in your personality, the more able you will be able to process those other things in your life in a way that's constructive. So I know that's a little technical, but this, using the Enneagram as a tool in times of stress, helps you understand, okay, I can read about, once I identify my personality, what am I likely to do when it's stressful? And even why am I likely to do those things? Because of the way that I've been wired with that. So that book, Shape, by Eric Ries, is an interesting book to look at too, if you're interested in more self-awareness. So what I would like to focus on a little bit more tonight is, last week I talked about affirming messages that would be really good for you to sort of move towards. But I want to talk about other messages that we received through our parenting. And so when we were kids, growing up with the personality we have, many of us received unconscious childhood messages. And these could have come not intentionally, but through significant people in our lives when we were children. And because of your personality, it's very likely that you related those messages in a particular way to a personality type. So it could have come through parents, or it could have come through significant people in your life. Maybe an influential teacher or coach or relative other than your parent. And it had a profound effect maybe on our identity and our growing up. And we also, at that point, if we received this message, it might have sort of suppressed or really hidden the true essence of your personality. And I don't know if this is going to be helpful or not, but I found when I heard this, it was also helpful for me to become more aware of what I might be believing and whether I've believed that for a long time. So these are what I call the not okay messages. So I'm going to go through them, and usually you may or may not relate to this, but you might want to write these down, these not okay messages. So the message that an unconscious childhood message that a 1 might receive in their growing up years is this: it's not okay to make mistakes. Somehow they filtered their experience, and the loud message was, it's not okay to make mistakes. So you can see how that message would provoke sort of like a perfectionistic view, trying to, well, that means I better not make mistakes. And so a 1 may have got that message and then started to build around that. The second, the helper, the 2, their not okay message is, it's not okay to have your own needs. It's not okay to have your own needs. In other words, everybody else needs to be taken care of. And then you can see why that would be a forming thing in a helper's life. 3's the achiever. It's not okay to have your own feelings and identity. So that it's not okay to have your own feelings and your own identity. So for an achiever, what that means is you have to earn your own identity through your achievements. That's what gives you value. – 4, the individualist. It's not okay to be functional or to be happy. That the message there is it's not okay to be functional or happy. So this would provoke in a child and then in your growing up years that you know there's something not quite right about yourself and life is basically pretty serious. And so it provokes a lot of inner thinking. For a 5, as an investigator, the message, the unconscious childhood message, typically is it's not okay to be comfortable in the world. And I'll say that again, it's not okay to be comfortable in the world. And so for the investigator, they're always looking for more data, more research, more enlightenment, and don't settle, don't be comfortable. You've got to keep pushing for more and more and doing that. So it's sort of not like the perfectionist, but it's more like gathering data and gathering information that way. For the 6, the loyalist, it's not okay to trust yourself. In other words, it's not okay for you to trust yourself. You can't rely on yourself to give yourself good advice. And so you're never quite certain on your own. And so that breeds in a 6 insecurity and also suspicion about that whole thing of trust. And that's an unconscious childhood message. For the 7, the enthusiast, it's not okay to depend on anyone for anything. So this is almost like an abandonment and you're not going to be cared for message. It's not okay to depend on anyone for anything. And so that message would provoke you have to go out and have as many experiences as possible. You have to keep, it's an endless quest for going out there. That's why they're not satisfied with what they have. They want more and more and more, because nothing is really dependable and you need to rely on other things, outside experiences. 8, the challenger, it's not okay to be vulnerable or to trust anyone. It's not okay to be vulnerable or to trust anyone. This unconscious childhood message is you have to be strong and don't let anybody know what your weaknesses are. You have to be strong for your family. Most 8s have experienced some sort of trauma growing up where they had to grow up earlier, and so they had to rise above their siblings or rise up in the family and be the protector, and also, they had to stop being a child and basically be adult. And so they had to really be strong. And so that could be an unconscious message that they got. And then lastly, the 9, the peacemaker, the message they got unconsciously is it's not okay to assert yourself. It's not okay to assert yourself. And again, for the 9, they are more accommodating of everybody, and they don't sort of they definitely don't impose their opinion on other people. Doesn't mean they don't have opinions or strong opinions, but they don't assert their opinion because they've believed that it's not okay to do that. And so I found those unconscious childhood memories are actually indicators of what might trigger us in times of stress. And so in a time of stress, we might be triggered into poor behavior if it touches on one of those unconscious childhood memories. Now, I don't know if that's helpful or not, but you might need to go back and listen to that again and think about, well, where does that happen in my life? Does it happen in my life? It'd be good for you to think about it. Now, what's interesting too, if you took last week's note about the affirmations and compare it to these unconscious messages we get as children, they're a perfect sort of antidote to that. The affirmation brings you out of those boxes that these unconscious messages have put you in. And I think that's really important. So just along with that, I've got one more little list that I want to do tonight, and then you're welcome to ask questions, so feel free to ask questions here. But for all the Enneagram types, if you read materials, this book I want to keep promoting. I think this is a great book. This is, to me, one of the most helpful books I've ever had on the Enneagram, and so a lot of the material I share comes from this. But we have basic desires. Each personality type has a basic desire. So the basic desire for a reformer is integrity. That's their basic desire. They desire it for themselves. They desire it for other people. That's a basic desire. It's a good desire. It's the way they're wired. But the distortion of that desire is perfectionism. So the basic desire is integrity, but the distortion of that desire is perfectionism, and stress will actually distort that desire towards that thing. So for a 2, the basic desire is to be loved, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, to really want to experience love. That's a basic desire of a 2. The distortion of that is the need to be needed. And you might think, well, that's not a bad thing, the need to be needed, but it can create bad behavior and set that person up to accept abuse or something like that because they need to be needed. But the good desire is to be loved. For a 3, the basic desire, which is the achiever, is to be valuable. They want to add value. They want to be valued. They want to add value through their achievements. And this, though, the distortion of this can be chasing hard after success. So I might have said this before, one of the manifestations that's a distortion of trying to be valuable is workaholism, chasing too hard after success. And then you know what the problem with that is. It's often relationships suffer if you chase too hard after success. And your identity isn't in whether you succeed or fail. That's what I'd say to a 3. You are valuable. Number 4, the individualist. The basic desire for a 4 is to be unique, to be oneself, to be true to yourself, and to be unique, which I think is great because we are all unique. That's an actually true statement. But unfortunately, the distortion of that is self-indulgence or looking totally too deep within yourself, trying to, foster that I need to be unique and different from everybody else. And so they just start to say, I'm not like anybody else. There's no one can relate to me, really. And so they become self-absorbed and isolated in that. That's the distortion of the desire to be unique. The 5, the basic desire is to be competent, and competent would be their basic desire. And this can be distorted into what you can call useless specialization, or in other words, becoming so fixated on one thing in the quest of being competent that they become unrelatable and sort of out of touch with what's going on around them. So they sort of get swallowed into a focus, a focus area, and on the quest of being really, really competent in something. The 6, the basic desire is for security, to be secure, to promote safety for themselves and others. That's a big driving force for them. But unfortunately, the distortion of that is a real attachment to what they believe to be true and their own judgment. So they become attached to their own judgment. So once a 6 gets suspicious and makes up their mind about someone or about themselves, it's very hard to cross back. and to let that judgment go, because there's some sort of security in having something solid, even if it's a negative solid. They sort of are immovable there. The basic desire of a 7 is to be happy, and unfortunately that's an insatiable thing, and so frantic escapism can be what a distortion of that is, endlessly seeking the next thrill or the next pleasure or the next adventure. Once you've achieved that, then you're on to the next thing, and so on and so forth. So it can be distorted. The basic desire of an 8 is to protect yourself. And so just to be on guard and to protect yourself. And of course, the distortion of that is constant fighting and being very defensive and can be very aggressive. And so the distortion of sort of protecting yourself and boundaries is maybe constant fighting. And then the last one, the basic desire of a peacemaker, 9, is to be at peace. And it's so strong, the distortion is they don't deal with what needs to be dealt with. And so they become neglectful of the things that they need to deal with because they don't want to disturb the peace. So it's stubborn neglectfulness because they're peacemakers. So again, in times of stress, I think we are tempted to distort the good things that we are and what we bring, and to go into that sort of area. So tonight, what I wanted to really just encourage you to think about is, what was your childhood like, and what were the basic message, what were the it's not okay message? Review that and say, coming out of childhood, what did I think it was not okay to do? And then maybe you could use the Enneagram and say, is there any part of that that's still a part of where I am today? And is there beliefs there that are holding me back from who I'm wired to be? So that's one thing I'd like you to think about. What was some of the not okay messages you learned in your childhood? And I wonder if you'd be willing to look at that. The second thing I'd like you to do, back to that shape, if you were to write down spiritual gifts, passions, abilities, personality, and you could use the Enneagram type for that, and then major experiences in your life, if you were to actually spend some time writing that down, what is that telling you about who you are? How might that be important in terms of who you've formed to be as an adult? You are not just your personality, you're a combination of things. Looking at that and owning that and realizing what are the downsides of this, what are the upsides. And again, the whole thrust of the Enneagram is moving towards health and towards freedom and towards maturity. And so self-awareness is a big deal. And I think we're really tested during times like this to see how healthy I am. You know, what practices, what self-awareness needs to grow in my life. So that book Shape, I mentioned it at the end if you joined. That's by Eric Ries, and I just do recommend that. And I just want to say next week I will not be online because I'm at a virtual conference, but it means I'm in meetings. So I will not be able to hear next week. So I'm sorry about that, but hopefully the week after that, I'll pick it up again. If I've said anything tonight that you want more information on, just text me. You can message it right here. I'd be very happy to do that. So good night to you all. I hope this was helpful. Leave comments, that's always helpful for me. And have a great night. Bye-bye.